The sun, giver of light and life, shines most powerfully at the equator. Here, it powers an extraordinarily rich zone of life. Brilliant and bizarre species from 3 continents, 3 oceans. More than a line on a map, equator is a powerful force of nature.
Much of the equator traverses deep, empty ocean. But in the shallow seas of Indonesia, the tropical sun beats down on the world's greatest area of coral reefs. Coral reefs, created by the sun, overflow with extraordinary life. These reefs of riches are home to over 2,000 fish species. On a single dive, 283 different kinds of fish were counted here. This is a new world record. Even within fish families, there can be huge variety of shape, color, and occupations. The wrasse family boasts 185 members, ranging from imposing giants to delicate cleaners. The whole reef community is so spectacular that it's attracting scientific attention. And of all the groups, most interest centers on corals. The sheer variety of corals is dazzling and confusing. And understanding this diversity could change our understanding of evolution. Why does this marine wonderland exist here, among the islands of Indonesia? The answer is that a unique set of forces converge here. The equatorial sun powers a network of ocean currents flowing through the thousands of islands spread out between Asia and Australia. The main through current is equivalent to the flow of 100 Amazon rivers. But currents flow in all directions, and where they intersect at the western tip of New Guinea are found the richest reefs in the world at a place called Raja Ampat. The forest-covered limestone outcrops are largely untouched. Currents from many directions flow in deep channels and wash the reefs that fringe these islands. The currents are constantly bringing new arrivals to settle on these already crowded reefs. This hawksbill turtle has traveled thousands of kilometers on tropical currents to get here. Most fish have come just as far. From the coasts of Africa, the Americas, and Japan, all shuffle together, all adding to the richness of life. The canyons and overhangs are vital shelter for schools of juvenile fish. Some were spawned here, others drifted in on currents. Hiding away, they can feed and grow safe from predators. But the coral itself is also key to Raja Ampat's riches. There are over 400 different corals here. The best known are the branching types called staghorn or acropora. Based on shape, there are 350 acroporas, but by genetic analysis, there are only 170. So, how many are there? And more importantly, what exactly is a species? Corals are helping answer these puzzling questions. Coral reefs can be huge, vast, yet they are created by tiny creatures called polyps. Colonies of polyps build the reefs by secreting limestone. Polyps are animals. They use stinging tentacles to snare food from the current and draw it into their mouths. Staghorns, brain corals and plate corals are the major reef builders. But their impressive growth does not just come from a diet of plankton. They also soak up nutrients from fish. Any fish waste is recycled. But even being an ardent recycler is not enough to explain corals' tremendous growth. Their secret is solar power. The sun gives corals the extra energy to build massive reefs. So how do they do it? They do it by forging a powerful partnership with plants. Hundreds of millions of years ago, corals and plants came together to harness sunlight, thereby creating a major biological alliance. And that alliance is renewed when free-swimming algae colonize the polyps' bodies. Once swallowed, the coral's gut somehow recognizes these little aliens, and instead of digesting them, it wraps the algae in membranes and absorbs them. They're then moved towards the polyp's skin, where there's light. It's a partnership. The polyp provides nitrogen to the packaged algae, now called zooxanthellae, and they harness sunlight to make sugars, which helps their host to build reefs. But in the past, algae have also helped corals to survive. Different algae work better in different light and temperature conditions. And when conditions change, corals will exchange algae. Changing algae has helped reefs survive coral bleaching, sea level variation, and climatic upheaval over millions of years. These tiny partners have created huge limestone ramparts around the equator as altars to the sun. Corals strive for maximum surface area to capture maximum sunlight. The result is remarkable limestone sculptures. But they pay a price for worshipping the sun. They risk being choked by other sun lovers. A fine fuzz of seaweed grows vigorously over the reef surface. It's only constant grazing by reef fish that prevent corals from being smothered. They return the favor by providing shelter and protection. Staghorns offer the greatest protection. But get too close, you risk being stung by polyps. But the risk is worth it. Fish can venture out of their coral abode to feed. And then retreat in an instant. The reef is much like an ancient city. There's a maze of narrow lanes and back streets for a sea snake to explore. A reef may be tens of thousands of years old, but corals never stop growing. And as they grow, they compete for space with their neighbours using chemicals and stinging cells. The conflict between coral neighbours gives the reef its maze-like structure. It creates a three-dimensional puzzle of gaps and crevices that's more like a giant sieve than a solid wall. Currents percolate throughout the reef, bringing food and oxygen to every creature. Crevices are eagerly sought by a myriad of shrimps and lobsters. Tasty crustaceans need all the protection they can find. Many arrived here as tiny larvae swept on currents from as far away as East Africa. Predators lurk in the rocky canyons. Stonefish are perfectly camouflaged for ambush hunting. But they have another tactic: burial. With so many crevice dwellers, it's inevitable that many crevice predators have evolved as well. The sea snake is hunting for gobies and small eels. The reef attracts open water hunters too. When cuttlefish hunt, they flash. It's not certain why, but perhaps the rippling colours mesmerise small fish. They cruise the reef, scanning with sharp eyes that act like rangefinders. But not all tentacles are so mobile. This anemone waits for prey to touch its tentacles. They are primed and ready to stun. The tentacles draw the victim into a central mouth. An anemone is a single polyp, a giant relative of tiny coral polyps. In fact, there are many other members of the stinging coral family on the reef. Soft corals can create colonies by cloning exact replicas of themselves. Others have opted for branching forms, mirroring the trees above them. But instead of leaves, Gorgonian fans have tiny polyps straining the current. Their branches shelter juvenile fish. Each elegant fan also hosts beautifully hidden residents. Gobies perfectly match their fans' colour and form. But coral fans hide even more remarkable masters of disguise. There are at least 5 pygmy seahorses living on this branch. They're so specialised, they live only on Gorgonian fans. Most fan species here host their own matching species of pygmy seahorse. Many have been discovered only recently. The most recent is also the smallest. Hippocampus denise is 16 millimeters head to tail, making it one of the smallest fish on the planet. A new type of fan inevitably leads to a new caste of creatures evolving to live on it. It's no wonder new species are being found here all the time. Most pygmy species are true stay-at-homes, not just because they precisely match their host fan, but also because their eggs are never sent away on the current. Like all seahorses, pygmy fathers carry eggs and young in a pouch. This male is heavily pregnant. His young are active, kicking against his pouch. They will soon swim away to find the exact host fan they need. The color must match, no other kind will do. The best known and most intimate host-fish bond is that between anemones and clownfish. So why don't clownfish get stung by its tentacles? A young fish approaching a new anemone gently brushes against the tentacles, gradually anointing itself with mucus. After that, it never gets stung. Of nearly 1,000 anemone species in the world, just 10 are hosts to clownfish. All 10 live in this region close to Raja Ampat. Anemones protect their clownfish, but it's a two-way partnership. The fish also protects its host from predators, and anemones are high on the menu for butterfly fish. Young anemones without resident clowns are highly vulnerable. Some, like this bulb tentacle anemone, are totally reliant on clownfish and cannot survive without them. In fact, their tentacles only become swollen and bulbous when they have acquired clownfish. Much about this relationship remains a mystery. Anemones have a special system for increasing their numbers. They clone themselves. This vast waving field of tentacles began as one colonizing anemone. By dividing repeatedly, it produced a host of replicas. Cloning can only make identical copies. But the great variety of life on the sun-drenched reef has arisen by sexual reproduction. And it is sex that brings about change. Clownfish breeding is unique. On each anemone, the biggest fish in the group is always a female. She's attended by several males. And when she dies, the senior male changes sex within days and then takes over egg-laying duties. All their embryos begin life as males. A clownfish group can spawn all year round because there are no seasons to limit breeding at the equator. They lay a few hundred eggs and constantly care for the developing embryos. They're totally dedicated parents, unlike their neighbors. Out patrolling a patch of broken coral is a brightly colored mandarin fish. He displays his colors and keenness to mate, hoping to attract a female. When a female shows up, the pair engage in a brief courtship of fanning fins. This couple won't care for their young. Their strategy is mass production. As they rise, they release many thousands of eggs and sperm to mix in the water. Mandarin fish give their young a start in life, but that's all they do. The fertilized eggs are swept away on currents to distant reefs. Some as far off as Japan. Out on the reef edge, are other mass-spawning fish. But they also attract egg-eaters like bonito. The predators gorge themselves, but the mass spawners will succeed. Surgeonfish release millions of eggs, so that enough will survive to drift across the ocean and find a new reef. Many reef creatures are mass spawners, but none are as spectacular as corals. Once a year, around a full moon, an event takes place that is not only impressive, it's changing ideas about how species evolve. Corals can't move. The only way that the opposite sex can get together is mass spawning. On this one night, many closely related species spawn within a few hours of each other. Some corals produce eggs, others clouds of sperm. There are even corals that produce bundles of both. As they float away, bundles break apart, mixing with the spawn from thousands of others. Mass spawning is the only way corals can fertilize each other. And because it's sexual reproduction, the offspring will be different from their parents. And these differences are at the heart of recent scientific discoveries. At the equator, the drive to breed is matched only by the need to feed. The spawning attracts manta rays that filter the soup of eggs, and not far behind are fusiliers. Eggs will only survive if they can be rescued by ocean currents that will take them far away from the reef. Of the huge variety of corals that have spread around the equator, the Acropora or staghorns are the most widespread and the most puzzling. Most of the corals on this reef are Acropora, though you wouldn't know it. Their shapes are hugely varied. The most common is the branched version called staghorn that fish use for protection and food. But they can also spread their branches into spectacular flattened plate forms. And exposed to waves, they are stocky and robust. In sheltered deep water, they grow long and slender, reaching for the light. They all look very different, but all these amazing forms are Acropora. Their appearance is so variable that it's almost impossible to define exactly which species is which. In fact, corals are deceptive. It's been discovered that they can interbreed. Mass spawning makes interbreeding possible because up to 30 related corals will spawn together. It happens when the sperm from one species fertilizes the egg of one that's closely related. If this happens, a hybrid is produced. But mass spawning gives corals plenty of chances to create hybrids. And they are a fast-track way to new species. Even if a hybrid begins to grow, its chances of survival are slim. It's at the mercy of the currents and ocean predators. If it stays alive, it may drift vast distances. And as it travels, it grows into a swimming larva called a planula. If the planula finds a new reef, it searches for a place to settle. Finding a space, it glues itself to the reef. The tiny hybrid then begins to grow. It has qualities from both its parents, and if these qualities suit conditions on the new reef, it will flourish, founding a new species. A hybrid makes an unusual addition to a coral family tree. As a coral family evolves, each new branch represents a new species, diverging and growing ever more separate from its ancestors. But whenever species interbreed, the branches reconnect. Those that rejoin are hybrids. And each new species is usually a coral that's evolved after drifting on currents to a new home on a distant reef. There have been times in our planet's past when far-flung corals have returned. This occurred when successive ice ages gripped the world. Advancing ice sheets froze polar seas, causing global sea levels to fall as much as 120 meters. In southern Asia, falling sea levels connected islands, closing ocean channels. Increasingly powerful ocean currents rushed through the remaining gaps, sending corals great distances and bringing others back from far-flung reefs. When the ice melted and sea levels rose, the currents weakened and corals stayed closer to home. Over millennia, this process repeated many times. On a grand scale, the pulse of the ice ages is mirrored in the coral family.